What happens when a mother's careful warnings are dismissed as jokes? She turns her worries into something priceless, and her next move leaves everyone stunned. Martha Blake had always been a worrier, or so her daughter-in-law, Cynthia, liked to joke. In Martha's view, caution was the reason her house had never burned down, why her children had never broken a bone, why her pantry was always stocked for a snowstorm. But in Cynthia's world, concern was weakness, and Martha's steady stream of "Are you sure?" and "Maybe we should double-check" was nothing but a punchline. It began on a rainy Monday in late March. Martha arrived at her son Tom's house to watch her two grandchildren, Emily and Max, while Tom and Cynthia headed out for a rare date night. The sky was gray and sullen, and Martha, umbrella in hand, noticed the gutters spilling over. Water pooled around the front steps. She stepped inside, shaking off her umbrella, and called out, "Tom, your gutter's overflowing again. You should get that looked at before it damages the foundation." Cynthia, in her signature red blazer and heels, breezed down the stairs, laughing. "Oh, Martha, you and your disasters. It's a little rain. The house is fine. Why don't you worry less and have some fun?" Martha smiled politely, but the comment stung. "It's just, sometimes little problems become big ones," she offered, voice careful. Tom kissed her on the cheek and squeezed her shoulder. "We'll be back by 10, Mom. The kids can have mac and cheese. Don't worry about a thing." He winked, and Martha nodded, keeping her worries tucked away. The evening went smoothly. Emily wanted to draw, Max played with his trucks, and Martha kept an eye on the storm outside. At one point, she saw the neighbors' trash cans float down the street, swept by the growing current. She checked the basement door, just in case, and found a small puddle on the landing. She grabbed towels and mopped up the water, quietly adding "seal basement door" to her mental list of things to mention. When Tom and Cynthia returned, Cynthia laughed when Martha described the puddle. "Our basement's just old. It always does that. No need to panic. You should relax more, Martha." She winked at Tom, and he tried to smile, but Martha noticed his glance at the floor. He looked tired, weighed down by something she couldn't name. The next morning, Martha called Tom just to check in. She reminded him about the gutters and the basement. Tom sighed. "Mom, please. Cynthia says we're fine. She doesn't want to spend money on stuff that isn't urgent." He sounded resigned, as if he'd had this conversation before. Martha tried to let it go. But as the days passed, she couldn't shake her unease. She visited again a week later after a windstorm, bringing groceries for the family. The steps were slick with moss, and the front door stuck in the frame, swollen from damp. Cynthia opened the door and saw Martha inspecting the wood. "There she goes again." Cynthia laughed, calling out to Tom, "You'd think your mom expected the house to fall apart." That afternoon, Martha helped Emily with homework while Max napped. She noticed a strange smell in the hallway and found a patch of mold growing in the coat closet. She quietly cleaned it up, taking care not to alarm the kids. At dinner, Martha raised the subject. "There's some mold starting in the closet. Maybe it's from the leak." Cynthia rolled her eyes. "Oh, for heaven's sake. If you keep looking for trouble, you'll find it. Lighten up, Martha. We're not living in the dark ages." Tom looked away, pushing food around his plate. That night, Martha walked home in the rain, her heart heavy. She worried not only for the house, but for Tom, his silence, his tired eyes, the way he let Cynthia laugh off every concern. It wasn't just about gutters or mold anymore. It was about being heard. She sat in her favorite chair, listening to the storm batter her own windows, and wondered what it would take for Cynthia to take her seriously. Or if, maybe, she needed to take her worries somewhere else, somewhere they might be worth something, after all. The next week, the weather turned unseasonably warm, bringing heavy rains that lingered over the neighborhood. Martha went about her usual routines, grocery shopping, volunteering at the library, calling Tom to check on the grandkids. Each time she asked about the house, Tom gave the same response, "Everything's fine, Mom. Cynthia says it's not a big deal." But Martha's unease grew. She read the local paper and noted that the town was offering free home safety inspections to seniors. She clipped the ad and tucked it into her purse. On Thursday, she stopped by Tom and Cynthia's house to drop off some muffins for the kids. Cynthia greeted her at the door, bright and brisk as always. "Oh, Martha. To what do we owe the pleasure? Cynthia asked, her tone cheerful but slightly mocking. Just thought I'd bring a treat and check in on you all, Martha replied, glancing past Cynthia at the muddy entryway and the rain-spattered windows. Martha spent an hour playing with Emily and Max, then wandered into the kitchen to wash up. She noticed water pooling near the base of the dishwasher, the cabinet wood swollen. She called out gently, "Did you notice a leak here, Cynthia?" Cynthia rolled her eyes, tossing her hair. "If you see something wrong, you fix it, Martha. I'm not going to worry about every drip and draft." She laughed, then leaned closer, whispering as if it were a secret joke. "You're such a worrywart. I swear, if I spent my life fretting like you, I'd be old before my time." Martha smiled, but inside, she was boiling. She dried the floor as best she could and quietly checked the rest of the house. In the guest room, she spotted bubbling paint near the ceiling, another sign of a leak. She snapped a photo with her phone and made a note. Before leaving, Martha asked Tom to step outside for a moment. Under the carport, out of Cynthia's earshot, she handed him the newspaper clipping. "You should call for a safety inspection, Tom. It's free. And you might catch problems early, before they cost a fortune." Tom hesitated, glancing toward the window where Cynthia stood watching. "Cynthia doesn't want outsiders poking around. She thinks it'll just make us look paranoid or incompetent." His voice was tired, almost defeated. Martha's patience began to fray. "Sometimes, Tom, you need to listen to your gut. It's not about pride. It's about your family's safety. About your investment. You've worked too hard to let things rot." Tom promised to think about it, but Martha could tell his words meant little. She drove home, muttering under her breath about stubbornness and pride. At her own house, she spent the evening researching home maintenance forums, looking up warning signs for foundation trouble, and even emailing a former neighbor who now worked in real estate. By the weekend, Martha had a file full of information and more pictures of suspicious spots in Tom's house. But each time she tried to bring it up, Cynthia met her with jokes and dismissals, while Tom shrank further into silence. On Sunday, at church, Martha confided in her friend Betty, who listened with a knowing look. "You can't save people who don't want saving, Martha. Maybe it's time to look after yourself for a change. Or, if they won't value your worries, see who else might." That night, Martha sat at her kitchen table with her file of photos, notes, and the untouched clipping. For the first time, she wondered what her careful eye and experience were really worth. Not just to her family, but maybe, just maybe, to someone else. And a new idea, both wild and practical, began to take root in her mind. The following Monday, Martha woke early, her mind buzzing with Betty's words and the feeling that she was missing an opportunity. She spread her collection of notes, photos, and clippings across the kitchen table, studying them over a mug of strong coffee. The more she looked, the more she realized how many times her careful attention had been ignored, not only by Cynthia, but by others, too. Martha decided to take a walk. On her way to the park, she stopped by a neighbor's house. Mrs. Kim, a widow in her 70s whose shingles had come loose in the last storm. Mrs. Kim greeted Martha warmly, inviting her in for tea. As they chatted, Mrs. Kim confided her worries about the drafty attic and squeaky back steps. "My son keeps saying it's nothing, but I can't sleep with the wind howling through the rafters." Martha's eyes sparkled. "Would you like me to take a look? I've gotten pretty good at spotting what needs fixing. After all these years, it's second nature." Together, they toured Mrs. Kim's house, Martha pointing out simple solutions and warning signs. By the end of the visit, Mrs. Kim was jotting notes and planning to call a handyman. "You should do this for others, Martha," she said. "Not everyone can see what you see." The idea kept echoing in Martha's mind. When she returned home, she called Betty and shared her afternoon. Betty laughed and insisted, "You could start a business, Martha's Home Worry Service. I'd be your first customer." The seed was planted. That night, Martha sat down at her computer and drafted a flyer. "Experienced homeowner offers safety and maintenance walkthroughs. Let me worry for you." She listed her phone number, a few references, and added, "affordable, thorough, and honest advice from a retired mom who knows what matters." She printed a dozen copies and tacked them up at the library, grocery store, and church bulletin board. To her surprise, calls trickled in within days. First was Mrs. Patel, then a retired schoolteacher named Frank, then a young couple expecting their first child. Each visit, Martha brought her notepad and sharp eye, walking through homes, offering advice, spotting issues before they grew costly. She showed Mrs. Patel how to seal a window. She told Frank where he could get a rebate on his new water heater. For the young couple, she outlined the basics of gutter care and how to recognize mold in the basement. With every visit, Martha's confidence grew. Neighbors paid her small fees, sometimes just enough to cover gas, sometimes a little more as thanks. Word spread. People began to see Martha not as a worrier, but as a resource. She felt valued, respected, and busy in a way she hadn't been in years. One evening, as Martha was finishing up at Mrs. Kim's, Tom called unexpectedly. "Hey, Mom, you've been hard to reach lately. Everything okay?" Martha smiled, the irony not lost on her. "I've just been helping a few neighbors with their houses, Tom. Turns out, some people appreciate a good worrywart." He chuckled, but there was a note of uncertainty in his voice. "Well, good for you, Mom. I guess you were always right about that stuff." Martha hung up, feeling a warmth in her chest she hadn't felt in ages. For the first time, her worries had turned into something rewarding and profitable. But there was still Cynthia, who continued to laugh, dismiss, and ignore the mounting issues at home. And Martha, busy as she was, kept one eye on the storm clouds gathering over Tom and Cynthia's roof, knowing it was only a matter of time before worry would become necessity. By mid-spring, Martha's home worry service had become the talk of the neighborhood. She scheduled daily visits, some for quick checkups, others for thorough walkthroughs, and her phone rang with new requests every week. At the farmer's market, shoppers stopped to thank her for catching things their contractors had missed. At church, people handed her lists of questions. For the first time in years, Martha found herself busy, energized, and even a little flush with cash. One morning, while reviewing her growing stack of thank-you notes and modest payments, Martha got a call from a realtor, Mrs. Connors, who'd heard about her reputation. "I'd like to hire you to consult on a few older properties before I list them. My buyers trust me, and I need someone with your eye for trouble." "You have a knack, Martha." Martha's cheeks flushed with pride. "I'd be happy to help, Mrs. Connors. Just let me check my calendar." She penciled in the new jobs, realizing her small side business was becoming a genuine part-time career. Meanwhile, the problems at Tom and Cynthia's house steadily grew. Cynthia continued to mock Martha's concern each time she dropped by. "What are you worrying about this time?" she'd call from the kitchen, smirking. The bubbling paint in the guest room had spread, and the musty smell in the basement worsened. Tom privately admitted he was worried, but Cynthia refused to spend money on repairs. "It's just old house stuff. Martha makes everything sound like a disaster," she insisted. Martha did her best to keep her visits brief and pleasant, never pushing too hard, but her eye caught every sign of worsening neglect. She warned Tom, gently but firmly, "You know, some problems don't fix themselves. They get more expensive the longer you wait." Tom would nod, brow furrowed, but Cynthia would always wave off Martha's advice. That month, Martha's finances changed for the better. She deposited the largest check she'd ever received from Mrs. Connors for consulting on 3 Victorian homes. With the extra income, she treated herself to small luxuries she'd put off for years: a new pair of walking shoes, dinner with Marion at a nice restaurant, fresh paint for her own kitchen. Her bank account grew, as did her sense of independence. Martha started planning a trip to visit her sister in Arizona, a dream she'd shelved for a decade. Each time she checked her balance, she felt a secret thrill. "So this is what it feels like to be valued," she thought. One afternoon at the library, Martha overheard 2 women whispering about a terrible mess at Tom and Cynthia's house. "I heard the city inspector came by, said the gutters were clogged, there was water damage, and even some mold." Cynthia's beside herself. "Tom looks worn out." Martha's heart clenched with worry for her son and grandchildren, but she forced herself to step back. She'd offered her help. She'd warned them. Now it was out of her hands. Later that week, Tom called, his voice strained. "Mom, the city left a notice. We have to fix things or face a fine. The repairs are expensive." Cynthia's freaking out. Martha listened quietly. She felt sympathy, but also a calm sense of vindication. She had worried and acted. She had been laughed at, dismissed. But now, as she hung up the phone, she couldn't help but smile, thinking of her growing savings and her upcoming trip. She chuckled softly to herself. Some people laugh at worry. Others learn to profit from it. Spring faded into summer, and Martha's calendar was now full weeks in advance. Every day, she juggled home visits, calls from realtors, and emails from neighbors grateful for her insight. Even the local paper called for an interview. Grandmother turns worry into wealth. Meet the town's newest home advisor. Martha felt a sense of pride and independence that was entirely new. Her sister in Arizona, hearing the news, wrote, "You're famous. You always were the smart one in the family." Meanwhile, Tom and Cynthia's house descended into chaos. The city notice had forced Cynthia's hand. Repairs had to be made, and quickly. Contractors traipsed in and out for days. Roofers, plumbers, mold specialists, painters. The cost ballooned by the week. Cynthia's pride crumbled as invoices piled up, and she realized there was no easy fix for years of ignored maintenance. Martha, hearing of their struggles from both Tom and the community grapevine, maintained a careful distance. She wanted to help, but she also knew her advice had gone unheeded for too long. Instead, she focused on her growing business, offering extra attention to elderly clients and new homeowners who hung on her every word. One afternoon, Mrs. Kim presented Martha with a hand-knit scarf as thanks. "You saved my roof, and probably my health too." One day, as Martha finished a consultation for Mrs. Connors, she ran into Cynthia at the supermarket. Cynthia looked exhausted, eyes ringed with fatigue, voice brittle. She hesitated, then said, "Martha, I owe you an apology. I never took your worries seriously. Now look at us, up to our ears in repairs. Tom's stressed, and I feel like I failed the family." Martha listened, kind but firm. "Cynthia, it's not about being right or wrong. It's about caring enough to act before it's too late. I hope you can get things back on track." Cynthia nodded, her pride stripped away. "I wish I'd listened. I really do." Later that week, Tom called Martha, asking if she'd come by to check on the house, this time with genuine respect in his voice. When she arrived, Tom handed her a check, insisting she accept payment for her advice. "You saved half the block, Mom. You deserve it." Martha accepted, and together, they walked the property as she pointed out what to watch for next. Tom listened closely, taking notes, determined not to repeat past mistakes. That night, Martha deposited Tom's check along with the others, a quiet satisfaction warming her heart. She laughed, this time, not from spite, but from the joy of finally being seen and valued for her careful eye. With her Arizona trip booked and a new sense of freedom, Martha realized she had transformed her lifelong worry into wisdom, and turned every slight into a step toward something greater. Martha's bank account was healthier than it had been in years, and her spirit even more so. She finalized her Arizona travel plans, 2 weeks with her sister in a sunlit retirement community. Marion drove her to the airport, both women giggling like teenagers. "Bring me back a cactus magnet," Marion teased as Martha waved goodbye at the security gate. Arizona was everything Martha had hoped: blue skies, leisurely breakfasts on the patio, and afternoons filled with laughter and old family stories. Her sister, Evelyn, beamed with pride as she introduced Martha around. "This is my little sister, the one who turned worrying into a business." Neighbors were fascinated, asking Martha for home safety tips and tales of the disaster house back east. While she was gone, her phone buzzed constantly with messages from clients, Tom, and even Cynthia, who sent photos of completed repairs. "We finished the roof and the basement, thanks to your notes. House feels safe for the first time in years," Cynthia wrote, ending with a simple, honest thank you. Martha took time for herself, swimming, reading, writing postcards to the grandkids. She found herself smiling for no reason at all, the old ache of being dismissed finally gone. For once, she lived each day without the shadow of obligation. When she returned home, Martha was greeted like a celebrity. Mrs. Kim brought flowers, Betty hosted a potluck, and even the mayor, whose mother was one of Martha's clients, stopped by to say hello. Martha's business had blossomed in her absence. Marion had kept the appointments running smoothly, and the waiting list for Martha's home worry service stretched into the next month. Martha met with Tom and the children for dinner. This time, they listened intently as she told stories from Arizona and offered gentle reminders about seasonal maintenance. Tom and Cynthia's gratitude was genuine. No jokes, no eye rolls, just respect and affection. That evening, as Martha tucked away her travel bag, she found herself reflecting on everything that had changed. She opened her new leather-bound journal, a gift from Evelyn, and wrote, "It's not worry if it brings wisdom. It's not fear if it leads to action. For the first time in my life, I feel free to laugh, knowing I've built something real, for myself and for others." The next day, Martha sat on her porch, coffee in hand, watching the world bustle by. She realized she hadn't just laughed all the way to the bank, she'd laughed her way into a new chapter of life. Autumn arrived in a blaze of color, and with it came new rhythms. Martha's home was busier than ever. Neighbors popped in with questions, former clients sent gifts, and her phone rang off the hook with requests. She even received a call from the local community college, inviting her to guest lecture for a class on Home and Hearth, Practical Skills for Modern Life. Martha agreed, and her first lecture was a hit. Students, young, old, newly married, recently divorced, hung on her every word as she explained the real cost of ignoring a leaky pipe or skipping routine checks. She relished the chance to turn her life's lessons into something useful, to watch heads nod in understanding instead of dismissive laughter. At home, Tom and Cynthia became regular visitors again. Sunday dinners returned, this time at Martha's cozy kitchen table, with the grandkids sharing stories from school. Cynthia brought her famous apple pie, and the two women found themselves laughing, genuinely this time, about the early days of Cynthia's marriage to Tom. There was no trace of mockery, only appreciation for how far they'd come. One afternoon, Tom handed Martha an envelope. "It's a little late, but we wanted to show you how much we value everything you've done." Inside was a gift certificate for a weekend spa retreat and a handwritten letter of thanks from both Tom and Cynthia. The words moved Martha more than she expected. "We were wrong. Your worries saved us. Thank you for never giving up." Martha's business continued to thrive, but now she was careful to leave time for herself. She and Marion took day trips, exploring antique stores and hiking new trails. Evelyn visited from Arizona, and the sisters spent a week reliving old memories and making new ones. The respect Martha earned from her work rippled outwards. Several neighbors formed a homeowners cooperative, pooling money for repairs and consulting Martha on every big decision. The city even named her Citizen of the Year, a moment that left her blushing in front of a crowd at the annual fall festival. As the leaves began to fall, Martha realized she no longer worried about being dismissed or overlooked. Her life was full of purpose, love, friendship, and the quiet wealth she'd created by trusting her instincts. That night, before bed, Martha wrote in her journal, "Worry was never the enemy. Not being heard was. Now my voice carries, and I am richer for it, in every way that matters." Winter came gently that year, bringing crisp mornings and a hush over the town. Martha awoke each day feeling content, the old burden of being just a worrier long gone. Her calendar was as full as she liked, some days reserved for business, others for family or simple pleasures, puzzles by the fire, long phone calls with Evelyn, or coffee with Marion in the bustling warmth of the bakery. As Christmas approached, Martha's family gathered at her home. The grandkids hung ornaments, Tom set up the tree, and Cynthia, with a wink and no hint of mockery, insisted Martha take a break while she finished the pies. Laughter echoed through the house, free of tension or resentment. After dinner, Tom made a toast. "To Mom, who taught us all that worry isn't weakness. It's a gift when shared with love." Cynthia chimed in, "And to listening before it's too late." Martha's eyes sparkled as she raised her glass. She realized how much had changed, not just in her bank account, but in her spirit. She'd transformed her careful eye into something that protected and enriched lives, her own most of all. In the weeks that followed, Martha began mentoring a new friend, Lily, a young single mother eager to learn the ropes of home ownership. Passing along her hard-won knowledge felt like planting seeds for the next generation. "Let them laugh if they want, Lily," Martha told her. "But remember, wisdom pays dividends no bank can match." When her phone rang now, it was as often for friendship as for advice. The home worry service continued, but at Martha's pace, on her terms. She never felt rushed, never felt overlooked. On a quiet New Year's Eve, as snow dusted the windows, Martha sat by her fire, journal in lap, tea at her side. She wrote, "All my life, I worried about being dismissed, about not being enough. But every worry was a brick in the house I built for myself, and for others. Now every laugh rings out in joy, every day is richer, and I am exactly where I'm meant to be. She closed her journal, smiled at the peaceful hush in her home, and let herself laugh, a full, delighted sound that needed no one's permission. Outside, the world glittered with promise. Martha had the last laugh, and it echoed all the way to the bank, and straight to her heart.